Morena tātou. Welcome to the Palmerston North City Council meeting of Wednesday, the 25th of June 2025. I'm the Deputy Mayor, Deputy Marshal Lobb. We have our Administrator, Sarah Claridge, who is Governance Advisor, and also advising is Hannah White, Manager of Governance. And sitting next to me for part of the meeting is Chris Dyberg, who is our Deputy Chief Executive Officer, and when he vacates that position, it will be Wade Crockett, the Chief Executive, who will step in that place. Senior leadership team members and also officers, along with our elected members, are present today. Ngā mihi ki a koutou katoa. Greetings, everyone. Just to explain that the meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Now, just to let you know, there have been issues in this area, not necessarily in the chambers, with regards to IT, so should things shut down, we'll be hoping that they kick up again before long, start again. The health and safety requirements for the Council chamber are displayed. In the case of a fire and emergency, on hearing the alarm, please leave this site immediately by the nearest fire exit. Evacuate to the assembly area, the clock tower, Te Marae o Hine, the square. Health and safety, smoking and vaping is prohibited within any council public entrance, building or site. A defibrillator is located outside the entrance to the customer services on the ground floor, and please report any near miss or incidences to the committee administrator. It's good to see Councillor Johnson online, ngā mihi ki a koe whaia, and could I ask that all online participants keep their cameras turned on and microphones muted unless addressing the meeting, and could councillors and presenters give their name before speaking and use the microphone. It helps if you're up a little bit closer. Sometimes if we're back we can't hear. That's for members of the public or anyone coming forward. I'd now like to invite Councillor Fitzgerald to start our hui in earnest with a karakia. Thank you, Councillor.
Tēnā koe e te kaika, e te tuahine, whae Debbie. Koutou kua taiwa nei te ata e roto i te chamber. Ki a koe hoki, Councillor Lorna, me ana ki a koe, me karakia tātou. Tūtaua mai runga, tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, aumie, huie, tākie.
Tēnā koe e te tungani, Councillor Fitzgerald. Thank you for that. We have apologies received from Mayor Grant Smith for today. Do we have any other apologies? Ka pai, I'm happy to move that. Any other? Thank you, Councillor Hapeta. Any comment? If not, can I ask that we please vote? Thank you, Councillor Finlay. That's noted. Thank you. So we'll add that for early departures. Thank you. And Councillor Johnson and Councillor Finlay. If there's no comment on that or no opposition, then we'll just take it as the earlier vote stands. And that is unanimously supported. Thank you. And now it gives me great pleasure to, as we know, with the New Year's honours, we had some distinguished Palmerstonians who received their honours, and it gives me great pleasure to announce and congratulate them on behalf of Palmerston North City and the Council. So Mr Frank Goldingham received the Member New Zealand Order of Merit for services to outdoor recreation and seniors. As the inaugural chairperson of the Te Araroa Manawatu Trust for 16 years, he championed the early trail development, lobbying councils for improvements and applying for funding to connect the track from Fielding to Palmerston North. He supported the sledge track and backtrack segments of Te Araroa, on which a hut has been co-named after him. His contributions have made Manawatu a popular walking spot, and his work has motivated and encouraged seniors to gain all the benefits of walking, including improved physical and mental health and better community connections. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Frank. Second, we have Koe Annie Burma Taina Tangata Easter Schoon, who received the Member of New Zealand Order of Merit for services to the Pacifica and softball communities. Miss Annie Schoon has maintained strong connections to the Cook Island, Pacifica and softball communities in Palmerston North for over 40 years. She has been a pioneer and a role model. Her softball involvement has included being a coach, manager, selector and chief scorer for tournaments across local and national levels. She is a member of the Manawatu Softball Association. As a paraplegic, she has competed in shot put, javelin, discus and table tennis and holds national and a world record. She has supported the Pacifica Health Clinics and the development of the Pacifica Hub in the Bill Brown Park Hall. She connects with schools, tertiary institutions and other Pacifica communities for Cook Islands Language Week, and she shares language and cultural workshops. Koe Tina's Annie's administrative, organisational, cultural and sporting achievements have made significant contributions to community cohesion and well-being. Kia ora ana koe. Dr. Malcolm George Davis Mulholland received the Member New Zealand Order of Merit for services to health and Māori. Dr. Malcolm Mulholland of Ngāti Kahungunu Wairarapa is a prominent Māori academic who has been contributing to New Zealand society through governance and education, through the roles with Massey University since the late 2000s and more recently through advocacy. Dr. Mulholland co-founded in 2018 and the chair of He Reo Tūroro o Aotearoa, Patient Voice Aotearoa, an organisation which increases awareness of issues affecting patients and to improve patients' rights and health outcomes through the health system. Through Patient Voice Aotearoa, he has assisted the formulation and delivery of more than 20 petitions to Parliament with requests for more than 50 medicines to be funded, particularly around cancer treatment. Dr. Mulholland has published a wide range of Māori history, race relations and social politics, including Beneath the Māori Moon, an illustrated history of Māori rugby and a history of St. Joseph's Māori Girls' College. Ngā mihi ki a koe, Dr. Mulholland. Mr. Ian Robert Flockhart McKelvey, Member of New Zealand Order of Merit, for services to local government, governance, and as a Member of Parliament. Mr. McKelvey was Mayor of Manawatu District Council from 2002 to 2011, and the Member of Parliament for Rangitike from 2011 to 2023. As Mayor, he led an initiative to improve the management of Council's significant housing for the disabled and seniors portfolio, resulting in the establishment of the Manawatu Community Trust in 2008. He chaired the Board of Special Olympics New Zealand from 2011 to 2021. He was President of the Royal Agricultural Society of New Zealand from 1998 to 2002, overseeing a constitutional review that continues to inform the organisation's present operations. Tēnā koe, Ian. And finally, we have I'm going to add a bit more about Mr McKelvey. Mr McKelvey is a former New Zealand Pony Club patron, a New Zealand Polo Association honorary member, and has received lifetime memberships from the Royal Agricultural Society and Rangitike Racing Club. And finally, we have Mr Viliami Te Mohinga, honorary member of New Zealand Order of Merit for services to education and Pacific community. Viliami has spent more than 15 years advancing Pacific youth in the subjects and qualifications of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, otherwise known as STEM. Mr Te Mohinga is the founder and director of Amanaki STEM Academic, ASA, also known as ASA, an initiative he established alongside with his wife to address the underrepresentation of Pacifica students in STEM fields by providing a supportive environment and a tailored membership program in the Manawatu region. Since ASA became a trust in 2017, he has mentored more than 1,800 Pacific students, guiding them towards success in STEM fields. Viliami is a vocal advocate for systemic education reform and has presented at national symposiums hosted by Massey University, New Zealand Qualifications Authority, and other private and public organisations, where he has highlighted the need for educational policies that address the unique challenges faced by Pacific learners. Tēnā koe talofa, ngā mihi ki a koe Viliami. And indeed, we have a few other people who no longer live in Palmerston North but have a rich association with our city. Jude Dobson, she received the King's Honour for services to broadcasting and heritage. Distinguished Professor Paul Spoonley, he received the King's Honour for services to sociology. William Bill Commode for philanthropy and sustainability. He also received one of the honours along with Peter Nation, former New Zealand Field Days CEO, and Murray Meekstead, rugby player, broadcasting coach, who is honoured for services to rugby. So we acknowledge all those wonderful people who either live in Palmerston North or started here and are elsewhere, but who have had a wonderful achievement. And just to let you know, I actually had to shorten what I said because there's such a lot of information about the wonderful work all of them have done. So I'd like to, on behalf of Palmerston North City and our council, acknowledge all of those wonderful people. Tēnā koutou. And can I please, I'm happy to move that, and second by Councillor Naylor. Any comments? Can I ask that we please vote on that? Thank you, and that has been passed unanimously. Now we move on to public comment, and I'd like to invite James Irwin, Chair of Streets Ahead Palmerston North, and welcome James. Thank you, please come.
Thank you very much, Debbie.
Awesome.
Is that good?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Debbie, and councillors and council staff for the opportunity to talk. Covering off lowering of speed limits in Palmerston North, particularly in the inner city, and whether that gets added to the speed review that's occurring already. I've just got 3 quick points to cover off. So I'm Chair of Streets Ahead Palmerston North. I'm also a dad of kids in town and a football coach around town. 3 points I want to cover off are, firstly, vision. So what is your vision for our city, Palmerston North? Secondly, change. How much change would this cause? And thirdly, safety. So in regard to safety, I hope or I imagine that you're all aware of safety data in regard to car versus pedestrian accidents. The city centre is a pedestrianised area, and there's an inflection point for serious injury associated with car speed as it gets above 30 kilometres per hour. And so most international research points to 30 kilometres per hour being an appropriate speed within an urban area to reduce the risk of serious injury to pedestrians. The inflection point for death in a car versus pedestrian accident is around 50 kilometres per hour, which is our current speed limit. So I think that's very clear if you're looking at safety. 30 kilometres an hour is appropriate speed. And I know the current government advice is 40 kilometres per hour. That's better than 50. 30 is probably the target. Secondly, change. I think the council has done a wonderful job of implementing speed calming measures in the city centre. I drove from Pack and Save to Reburger this morning on my way to work. It was really quiet because there were no other cars around. It took 2 minutes and 45 seconds. It was 1.1 kilometres and my average speed was 25 kilometres per hour. And I spent a quarter of that time travelling faster than 30 kilometres per hour. Most of the time I was going slowly was waiting for other cars, waiting at roundabouts and traffic lights. When I drove here at 9 o'clock, I was travelling at 18 kilometres per hour through that same area. So not a lot of change really. I think we're already travelling slowly in the city centre. And then lastly, vision for Palmy. My vision for Palmy is my city is a place where everybody gets around easily on foot and not necessarily in a car. And that's particularly for our kids, that they can get to where they want on their foot or on their bike and not have to rely on their mum and dad to give them a lift somewhere in what is becoming a more congested city. So I ask you, what is your vision for Palmy and how does that impact on this decision about speed limits in the city? And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, James. Are you open to have some questions?
Oh, of course, Debbie, thank you.
Wonderful. Councillor Naylor, thank you.
Thanks, James, for coming in. The decision that we will make today is really around just the timing of the consultation. Do you feel that there would be any significance in consulting later this year versus earlier next year?
Well, I think that that this has been on the table for probably about 7 years in the council, so I'd advocate to just do it. Yeah, I think that one delay leads to another.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, James. We don't have any further questions, but I'd like to acknowledge you coming here today and speaking to us, and we appreciate that. And therefore, Council, I'd like to move that we receive the public comment, and thank you, Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you, James. And now can we please vote? Kia ora, we seem to be missing someone. So what we'll do, we'll go vote. Can I just ask that everyone vote on that? Thanks. Thank you. That's passed unanimously. Next, I'd like to call for declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? None received. Therefore, we'll carry on. Thank you. And now to confirmation of minutes from the meeting of June the 4th, 2025. We're going to take the public and the confidential together. I'm happy to move those. Second by councillor Hapeta. Thank you. And we have some comments from councillor Arnott. Oops, sorry. Thank you, councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. The resolution to authorise borrowing, I'm listed with 3 other colleagues as abstaining, where we actually voted against that. So I'd like that amended, please.
Okay, top of page 20, thank you, with reference to that. And I won't be a moment, I'm just going to take counsel from our governance manager. Councillor Arnott, I've been advised that we just need to check the voting record before we can move on that, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll just do that now. But councillor Wood, we're happy to move on with you. Thank you, councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a small note on page 13. It says I left the meeting at 3:57 and arrived back at 3:02. And unless it took me 23 hours to get back, I think it might need to be 4:02.
Good spotting there, councillor Wood. Page 13. Right, very good. And I believe there's a level of comfort around what you had mentioned, councillor Arnott. So the recommendation to council is that the minutes of the ordinary council meeting of 4th of June 2025, part 1 public as amended and part 2 confidential as amended be confirmed as a true and correct record. Moved by myself and seconded by councillor Hapeta. If there be no further comment, then I ask that we vote on that. Thank you. Thank you. That is passed unanimously. Next, we have notice of motion, inclusion of the city centre in the scope of the draft speed management plan, and we will take the officer's advice first. Therefore, I'd like to call Peter Ridge, our senior policy analyst, to come forward. Tēnā koe, Peter.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to present this advice. I'd like to start by saying that the officer advice that we presented back in May, it's very clear that a revision or review of the city centre speed limit is something that we support. The issue that we've been presenting here is, as Councillor Naylor pointed out during public comment, a question of timing. And we think there's some points that perhaps need to be considered in the context of this notice of motion. In the memo, we've identified 3. The questions of complexity and timing, the limitations of the rule, and we think it's probably worth just highlighting some matters from that. So first of all, the idea of reviewing the city centre speed limit isn't as simple as putting a box around that ring road and putting up a 30k speed limit. The rule has made some changes. The rule has introduced some changes as to what we can create as speed limits for certain roads. So as you recall, when we were discussing the speed limit reversals in March, the way speed limits are set now is by classification of the road. So within the city centre, there are different classifications of road, which will have a mix of speed limits apply rather than a single speed limit necessarily. Furthermore, the 30k speed limit that we've been talking about in the past is unlikely to be able to be used because the types of roads for which a 30k speed limit can apply is much narrower in the memo, there's a table which shows which roads can have that 30k speed limit, and none of the descriptions match the roads within the city centre. So we wouldn't be automatically looking at a 30k speed limit. We've done some initial looking of what roads we have in the city centre. We think a majority of them would be 40 or 50, and a small number might be 10 to 20 kilometres per hour. So it wouldn't be the same type of proposal we've had in the past. That immediately generates a different situation. Rather than a very simple proposal, we think it would be beneficial to engage with elected members on different varieties of that proposal. This ordinarily would have been done via a workshop, and the time between now and the election just doesn't permit that kind of engagement. We also think there would be stakeholders from the community who would have an interest in what those proposals might look like. Because there are some varieties there, there are more choices to make before a final proposal is put out for formal consultation. So I'm aware that it's frustrating to be told something is complex, but we want to make this clear to you that this isn't about us saying we don't think it's a good idea. We just think that more work needs to be done, and the time doesn't seem to be available for us to do that at this stage, and that's why we hadn't mentioned it in stage 2. The other part of this is we have new requirements around cost-benefit disclosure statements under the rule, and this isn't a particularly straightforward calculation. We've engaged a consultant to give us some advice on what that would involve, how long it would take, and what the cost would be. The indication is that it would take around 5 weeks to produce that result for us, and in the time frame that we've been looking at, that's not possible. The additional cost would be in the range of about $18,000, which we don't currently have budget for, and with additional engineering support on top of that, the total cost for doing that piece of work would be around $30,000. So those are the very key reasons for why we didn't recommend it for stage 1 and why we recommended it for stage 2, which, as I mentioned in May, we would be looking to start early in next year. We haven't got a specified time for when that would start, but we think it would be towards the end of the first quarter, and we think that the work would be completed, all of stage 2, by the end of next year. That amounts to an effective 6-month delay versus including in stage 1, which we thought was an appropriate time, given it allows us more time to do the work in a considered way and engage with elected members and with the community. However, if the council is of a mind to include this in stage 1, there is a potential path forward. We've indicated that this would be coming back to the Strategy and Finance Committee in August, if it's just what we proposed in the May report, which is the school variable speed limits and the 2 intersection speed zones. If we were to include the city centre speed limit in stage 1, we would be bringing this back to the October council meeting. This creates some risks. Firstly, we still don't have much time to do the engagement with you and with stakeholders. October seems like a long time away, but there's still quite a lot of work to be done before we can go out and engage with either you or the community. It also creates a risk that the decision is right before the election, and you may not have had much time to engage with us on what the shape of the proposal might look like. And if you're not happy with it in October, there's no time to review it and come back, which means we're looking at pushing this into next year, and the time saving, the bringing it forward, hasn't really been achieved. So I understand that's quite a lot to digest, and I hope I have been able to make it reasonably clear. I reiterate, this isn't about saying no to the city centre speed limit, as the speaker in public comment made clear, and this is something we've been working on for quite a while. The reasons why it hasn't got across the line so far are long and varied, but we have made attempts in the past. We think there is a clear path forward. It's just a question of timing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. We do have some questions. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Peter, for the advice. So just to clarify first up, this isn't really making a final decision around speeds. It's just about going to the community to get their views.
What we would be taking to the community is a proposal, like with all our proposals, for a change that we would make. And I think the issue we have here is at the moment we don't know what that proposal might look like, and the work to understand what the proposal might look like will take us more time than we have.
Thank you. Can you just remind us what year City Council first looked at reviewing city centre speeds?
There is quite a long history. I won't give you the whole history, but 2013
Great, thank
was
you.
the first time, yeah.
Great, thanks. And could you give us absolute certainty that it would go ahead into the new council if it's not agreed today?
I can't give that certainty. I can give you an undertaking that that's what we're proposing to do. A new council can set new priorities.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Peter. I've just got a couple of questions just around budget. The paper says that it's going to be in part funded through professional services, but then it goes on to say that there is no budget funding from professional services. So can you just tell us how we intend to actually budget for that, please?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll ask James Miguel to answer that question.
Certainly.
Good morning, James Miguel, Senior Transport Planner. So the budgets for the city centre, if we were to progress with it in stage one, those budgets would have to come out of somewhere in the transport budget. We've had conversations with the transport team. It effectively mean that something that the transport team was planning on doing wouldn't get done because we'd be doing that instead. Effectively, it's just using a budget from somewhere else, another project potentially.
Yeah, but is there the intention to use part of the funding from the professional services budget? Is that just the paragraph is just a little bit, I guess, confusing in terms of how it's going to be funded?
Yeah, sorry, through you, Madam Chair. I think there's two components to this answer. I mean, the first thing to be clear about is there's no dedicated budget in infrastructure or strategic planning to advance speed management planning activities. So I think what we've done with stage one is funded that through a combination of the city planning budget and the infrastructure budgets. If the city centre is added to stage one, then we would have to look at both the infrastructure and strategic planning professional services budget and just reprioritise projects accordingly. So, for instance, there's a paper later on in the order paper that talks about the challenges in terms of advancing some of the growth planning. So, for instance, the extra $30,000 or part of the extra $30,000 may well have to come from that city planning budget, which has got a sort of general pool for professional services.
Yep, thank you. So just for clarity, is the professional services budget, is that the budget which was reduced through the annual budget process?
Well, there was a general reduction across the organisation, but it wasn't targeted to specific budgets. So the reality is we're going to have to work very carefully with every set of professional services budgets we have.
Yep, thank you, David. Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Peter, for the report. My question really is a comment you made doesn't line up with what I thought I'd understood in the report. In 4.10, you talked about none of the other road classifications are applicable to the road within the city centre, and so a 30k speed limit is not permitted. Whereas I thought you said in your comment that there were a range of options where we could end up with a range of different speeds, and I certainly thought that possibly the space around the square, which is cultural or recreational reserve or similar, would fall within the definition for the 10 to 30 kilometre hour rule. So could you clarify for me, are we not able to look at that?
I think this is part of the complexity that we're trying to navigate here. So the table in the report outlines all of the roads that have 30 kilometres per hour as an option. The description in the class of road that you refer to there is described as unconventional, low volume or low speed road types. And one of the things that's been unhelpful from this new rule is the descriptions don't always match up with the kinds of roads we're describing here. So when you read the whole description, it refers to parking areas, beach access points, riverbeds, cultural and recreational reserve or similar. Some parts of the city centre might meet some parts of that description. The question is whether that's going to be appropriate. Then the second part of the question is whether the city centre as a whole will make sense with a range of speed limits applied. So in the previous proposals, when we've talked about a city centre speed limit, we've looked at a 30k around the entire area within the ring road, the inner ring road. If we were to have, say, 30 kilometres around the square, then the rest of it 40, the costs increase in terms of the treatments and the signs that we have to put up. The complexity of the speed environment changes for road users. We need to look at that holistically as well. So that's why I think we're saying it's more complex than just simply saying it's 30 Ks.
Certainly hearing that. And you talked in your comments about, we'd previously imagined this kind of box of the inner ring road going, that's the CBD, that's what we're talking about. But what I'm hearing you saying in this new, more complex world is that there's an opportunity maybe to look at something slightly more nuanced than just saying the inner ring road is it. We could just look at the square or a subset of what we've traditionally referred to as the CBD.
Correct, and I think that's why we talked about the opportunity for engagement with elected members and with stakeholders. If it was just a case of 30 Ks within the inner ring road, most people who are in support of this wouldn't have anything particularly strong to say about that. But if we're suggesting 30 Ks for this road and 40 K for these roads and maybe 10 Ks for these roads, there will be a lot of different views, and we wouldn't want to just push forward with a proposal without doing some work to understand those views first.
And sorry, I did have a few questions. As we heard in public comment, the reality of travelling around our central city is that it is a low-speed road environment because of the traffic calming measures, in part the vehicle movements in that space. Does that come into this class of road definition, description, or is that not what they're talking about?
I think up to a point. In previous iterations of the speed limits rule, there's been a very strong expectation that speed limits match the environment. And as we've already heard, the city centre is a low-speed environment. In May, when we presented this to the Strategy and Finance Committee, James pointed out that the speeds aren't equal across the city centre area. So there are some roads where the speeds are higher and some where the speeds are lower. Overall, it's around 30 to 40 Ks an hour. So a lower speed limit will match that environment. But if we're looking at a more nuanced or a more complex proposal, then we need to be clear how we're matching those speed limits to those different roads within the area.
Okay, right, thanks, Peter. I think that's all my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, team. Just given one of the key reasons highlighted for doing this in the notice of motion is the question of safety, have you got any updated crash statistics for the inner city that we might be able to hear to inform our decision?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, since May we haven't got any more accurate information around crash data, so no, we can't help you on that front, I'm afraid.
Just given there were some councillors who weren't here in May, would you mind reminding us what the environment looks like in terms of crashes?
Through the Chair, the crash statistics for the city centre were explored as part of the city centre indicative business case, and there was a few hotspots that were identified. The one that comes to the top of the head, and the only one that I could probably name, is the intersection of Main Street and Square East, the roundabout. But there was a few other kind of hotspots. So we do have some information on that from the city centre business case, but I couldn't tell you at the top of my head from right now.
Can you recall if there were any serious crashes in the last, say, 5-10 years? It's all right if you can't.
Yeah, no, apologies, I can't give you the details at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. If the proposal goes ahead to include the CBD speed limits in stage 1, and if there was a proposal agreed by the 8th of October, what would the likely timeframe for the consultation with the community actually be?
Through you, Madam Chair, the timeframe we're looking at for the formal consultation would remain the same. We're looking at starting consultation, whether it's approved in August or October, starting consultation on the 1st of November and going through until the 15th of December. The law requires us to consult for a minimum of 6 weeks, so it's quite a different requirement. We don't know anything beyond that because it'll depend on the meeting schedule that the incoming council agrees, but we expect hearings would be held, say, in February, with a final decision being made around April.
And are you aware of what other consultation might be happening later this year, around that time? If there's anything else that we'll be talking to our community about?
I would like to think I know, but I'm struggling to remember, unless anyone else, maybe Liv might know. Put you on the spot.
We're just pulling that plan together at the moment and are planning on having a bit of a map for both you guys and SLT and our staff to have a better grasp of what is coming up. The big ones obviously I think are more the other half of so early 2026, obviously annual budget, nature calls, those big ones then.
Thank you.
Thank you. A question from Councillor Johnson. Kia ora whaia.
Kia ora. Thanks, Peter, for your report. A couple of questions. The first one is, you seem to say something contradictory in that you seem to be concerned that if we went early with this city centre in stage 1, that we could end up delaying things. That didn't make any sense to me. I couldn't quite work out what you were trying to say with that.
Through you, Madam Chair, apologies if there was some confusion. I think what I was suggesting, Councillor Johnson, is if we were to try and include the city centre in stage 1 and we present it to the council in October with very little prior opportunity for elected members to engage on the details, if at that meeting the councillors were unhappy with what we presented, then we wouldn't be in a position to start consultation on the 1st of November. We would have to wait for the incoming council to approve it for consultation. I do appreciate it's a bit of a hard risk to understand, because it may be that the council on the 8th of October is quite happy with that and it can't go ahead. It's just a risk that we're thinking of if we haven't had sufficient time in advance to go over the details with you, whether you'll be satisfied with what we're proposing in October.
Okay. And then the other question was about budget. I guess my recollection was that when we made decisions about the professional services budget, that it was made quite clear that if extra budget was needed for projects, that staff could come back and ask for it. So I don't quite understand how, if council makes a decision to prioritise something, and staff don't feel that the professional services budget is sufficient, that staff wouldn't come back and talk about how that could be done, rather than just saying, oh, we can't do this because there's no budget. Surely if the vote today is to prioritise this work, then, you know, that in itself is us saying we think that this is a higher priority than other work, and if other work can't be done, you need to come back to us and tell us you need more budget.
Councillor, I think I've noted that as a comment rather than a question.
Well, it is a question, because the question is, why are staff saying that budget is an issue?
Right. Yes, I'll hand it over to the Deputy CE. Thank you.
Kia ora, through you, Madam Chair. You're quite right, and I think that was the point that Peter and David were trying to make, is that the professional services budgets are extremely tight, and I suppose the teams have a view about where that would be spent. So if this was to be added on, yes, we would do it using those budgets. And I think later in the year, when, you know, when we knew exactly where it was sitting, we may have to come back to council to say, remember that thing we did, well, it's made this impact, and, you know, we can have a conversation about whether that piece of work that's fallen off the end still needs to be done.
Okay. And in terms of a surplus, are we looking like having a surplus this year?
Through Madam Chair. At this stage, well, we're still a few days from the end of the financial year, but indications would be that I think we'll end up with some small surplus because of the revenue generated from the royalties on the wind farms.
Thank you. That's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Zabellan.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Peter. I just had a question, prompted from Councillor Wood's question on the focus on crashes and crash data. But I was understanding that the sort of safety in question was pedestrian safety, and you know, given that that's a high pedestrian area, do we have data or feedback response on how safe pedestrians are in that environment with many road crossings and parking movements, and or is that only counted if a pedestrian is actually struck?
Through you, Madam Chair. The data that I was referring to for the city centre business case, that looked at all modes, so crashes between pedestrians, cars, cars and bikes, cars and cars, and likewise. So, yeah, effectively there is statistics that do show conflict between all modes within the city centre. Again, as per Councillor Wood's question, I don't have those that information at the top of my head.
And so these are reported incidents, or are they, you know, like in quantitative measures, or are we able to capture the functioning of the environment for what the pedestrian experience is like?
In terms of the data of the crash statistics, so those are, I guess, the known crashes. There's always a quantum of unknown crashes or unreported crashes whenever you're talking about crash statistics. I guess to answer the second part of the question, there was an exploration as part of the city centre business case of identifying safety and accessibility for all modes, and I guess a perception that sometimes it's more difficult to access the city centre via other modes that are not car. That's probably the best answer I can give at this time.
Is that more like a feedback situation as opposed to a statistical recording? Do they work together?
Yeah, that's probably more of a qualitative rather than a quantitative data set.
Mm. Yeah. Oh, there we go. I did have just one more question, which was about the Schedule 3 of the speed limits rule, and you're referring earlier to the is it the previous iteration where they're trying to set speeds that reflect the natural travelling and speed, or reflect the natural speed that can be achieved in any environment. Is Schedule 3 trying to capture that in a different way through categorising and applying categories to roads?
Through the chair, the 2024 rule represents quite a different approach to previous rules. In previous rules, there have been a lot of consideration around the crash data, the geometry of the road, the use and adjacent use of the road. There are a lot of factors that went into identifying what was an appropriate speed for the environment. The new rule narrows a lot of things down to just that table, which gives us very little scope for coming up with alternatives to what is in that table. In some cases, there is a range of speed limits that we can consider. For instance, that category of unconventional, low volume or low speed road is 10 to 30. It could be 10 or 20 or 30. But we have very little scope to come up with something outside of that table. It largely hinges on how we classify the roads.
Is there a prescribed methodology for applying that classification that they've provided, or are we able to have some discretion on that?
No, there's no methodology that we're aware of. As we saw with the speed limit reversals question earlier in the year, depending on your appetite for risk as to how you might classify the road, you can apply a different speed limit. The concern that we would have is if you venture too far away from what seems a reasonable interpretation of the classification, NZTA have the power to come in and say that's not an appropriate classification, not an appropriate speed, and then they take away our ability to set the speed limit for that road.
Right, cool. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Sabellin. Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for letting me come back into the queue again just for another question. There's been some questions just around safety and crash data and things like that. So I know the answer to this, but I think other councillors probably would benefit from it. We actually use the NZTA crash analysis system, don't we, to actually record our crashes or have knowledge of the safety issues?
Correct, yes.
And there is a significant delay in terms of the data entry for CAS?
Yes, we're getting a nod through Glenn on that one.
Yeah, so it's quite difficult to get a real-time sort of understanding of the crash risk for pedestrians, cyclists, vulnerable road users within the CBD.
Through you, Madam Chair, Glenn O'Connor, Transport and Development Manager. Yes, the CAS system is New Zealand's way of recording transport accidents. There is quite a considerable lag, both in reporting and displaying on the system and also updating the system. So while it's good, it is definitely not real time and is not always up to date.
Thank you, Glenn, that's helpful. Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. That appears to be the end of the questions. So thank you, Peter, and thank you, James, and to those other officers who contributed to this. The recommendation is that Council receive the memo titled Advice on Inclusion of the City Centre in Stage 1 of the Draft Speed Management Plan. I'm moving that and second by Councillor Naylor. Thank you, Councillor. Let's vote on that. Thank you. That has been passed unanimously. Thank you. And now I'm going to ask Councillor Barrett could please speak to what he has brought forward, notice of motion. Thank you, Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair and colleagues. Just raising this today as we clearly didn't all have the opportunity at the committee stage to consider this decision. I want to thank Peter for the report and confirming that the work is possible to include in stage 1 with some adjustments to timing and budget prioritization accordingly. Just want to briefly touch on the key reasons why I'd ask for your support to include this in stage 1. The first one is around having a joined up conversation with the community. I think it's quite poor use of community energy to go out quite quickly now, have a conversation about school speed limits, and then just 6 months later start that same conversation again with the community around city centre speeds when there is so much in common between school speeds and city centre speeds. It's around reducing risk for pedestrians, improving access, improving vibrancy, and being more people friendly. Both of these areas will have citywide interest. Everyone uses the city centre and everyone lives near or knows someone in a local school. And these are obviously places that are pedestrian rich already. So it's really efficient and just makes sense to ask the community about the city center and the school zones once and to do it at the same time. The second reason is around realization of benefits. Obviously, a lower speed environment, including appropriate signage, will improve city center road safety, improve amenity, destination value, better matches the actual street layout, and it enables the live, work, play growth that we need to revitalize the city center. Just touch very specifically on road safety. New Zealand, Australian data, 50 km/h crash rate, vehicle and pedestrian, 80% of those people go to the morgue. Drop that to 40 km/h, only 30% go to the morgue. It is a massive win for a relatively small change. As council, we put a heap of work into health and safety and preventing harm. Let's bring that same energy to road safety in the heart of the city, rather than waiting for harm before we actually act. We know we can get in front of it, and we should. Final reason that I'd ask for your support is that we need to get this out of the never never. It's been in play since 2013, 12 full years. And yes, the report today says it's just around the corner. Well, we had a report in 2020 that it was just around the corner. You know, we should move now. I'll just highlight what we had in 2020. It was a draft speed limit bylaw. Some of you may recall it that were around the table at the time. Guess what it had? It had a two-stage process. Guess what was in stage one? Not city center. Guess what was in stage two? Oh, city center. Guess what never happened? City center. It's time for us to escape that two-stage trap and get on with it. One joined-up conversation, well-aligned across school zones and city center, helping deliver amenity, road safety benefits, and enable the growth and vibrancy in the heart of the city. It's just common sense to join this up, folks. Please get on with it and please vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Councillor Wood, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Barrett, for bringing this back to the table. I thoroughly enjoyed the debate last time, and I'll be looking forward to having it again. So, councillors, I read in the notice of motion that was put forward by the councillor 6 assertions, and I thought we'll go through them one by one to outline why I'm not going to support this today. The first assertion was it will enhance the city centre's live, work and play attractiveness, and I would suggest to you, councillors, that is meaningless political jargon unless you tell me how it is going to do that. And so on to the second assertion. It's going to make it more pedestrian and bike friendly. The city centre would have to be the most pedestrian and bike friendly place in the entire city, bar perhaps the river. The footpaths aren't packed. We don't have people crossing so much that we're having huge serious crashes all day, every day. In fact, the officers said themselves, the one crash hotspot that came to mind was a roundabout. I don't know about how fast you're travelling around roundabouts, councillors, but I would suggest speed is unlikely to be the problem there. I would suggest visibility, design and layout would be the problem there. And so speed does not fix that problem. Well, the third assertion was it will support city businesses. Have you talked to any of them? Have you heard from any of them? How? In what way? What evidence do you have to support that claim? I certainly haven't had my door knocked down by businesses saying, William, please lower the city centre to 30 or 40 kilometres an hour. That will do so much to help my business. And I imagine, with times being as tough as they are, if there were people out there who genuinely thought this was something that could help them, they would be asking us for it. The fourth assertion, it will increase road safety. And I've said before, I think this is a poor argument for a few reasons. One is that any speed reduction is going to make an area more safe. You could lower it from 30 to 20 or 20 to 10, so you've got to go with the reasons around it as to why it's a good balance between safety and usability of the area. And what we heard, in fact, Councillor Barrett will be very glad to know, it already is a slow speed environment. I don't just have to assert it. We had public comment here today who said they timed it. It took, his average speed was only 25 kilometres an hour. So I don't think we're talking about making this some sort of grand, slower, safer environment. The areas have already been designed to encourage and require people to drive slower. So really, all you're talking about is making the areas, say, going down Main Street or Taranui Street or the extremities of the network, where it is perfectly safe to travel faster, slower. Because the areas in the inner city are already slower and safer. The fifth assertion, improve traffic flow. And I tried to research this one because I was interested where it was coming from. And all the studies I could find in a New Zealand context talked about the Auckland CBD, the Christchurch CBD, and the Wellington CBD. There was not one piece of research I could find that talked about the benefits to a regional, small, rural city, what the impact would be on a slower speed environment. Yes, I agree, in the centre city of Auckland, where you've got stopping and starting, perhaps there are some improvements to traffic flow. But in lieu of hearing any evidence that that would be the case in a regional city, I am not going to accept the assertion that because it's true for Auckland, it's true for Palmerston North. And the sixth one was that it delivers cost efficiencies. How? I look forward to the right reply to understand where that's coming from. On the point of community consultation, I would suggest it is better not to combine the controversial with the non-controversial. I don't have a crystal ball, but I would suspect there are a few people in our community who would disagree with putting variable speed zones around schools. I suspect we would end up with the entire consultation being focused for those who support and don't support the city centre being slowed down, and it would override the good work that needs to be done to get those variable speed limits around schools. So I think it makes good sense not to combine these two areas together. A few final points is the cost of $18,000 to do this quickly seems unnecessary. The point that officers have made that legally it is dubious to suggest we go much slower. And in fact, what the classification we could use was the one where you have to have high levels of either cycling or pedestrian activity. And I would be, when you look in the context of New Zealand, surprised if the city centre qualifies as having high levels of pedestrian cycling usage in the context in which those road rules were made. So I question whether or not that would be possible. What other points would I like to make? It started 12 years ago. Let's leave it in the never, never. I see no reason. There's no urgency to this. It's not particularly important. It's not going to achieve the benefits that are being outlined. And frankly, I'm quite happy. In fact, when it comes to the second tranche, I won't support including it there either, because I don't see the point in spending money, the point in spending energy, and the point in doing something that it appears nobody's asking for, or very few people are asking for, to slow our city down. And so I'll leave you with this, councillors. Not that it's all about a headline, but I can see it. The City Council slows us down. That will be the result of this if we vote for it today, and I'm not going to vote to be slowing our city down.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and similarly from my decision at committee, I'm going to oppose this here again today for the reasons that Councillor Wood outlined, but several others. One is it's clear again, repetitive, that the officer's advice is not to include it, and that would increase costs, it will delay the process, a number of other factors in that. I think it's also simplified the fact that it's just going to be included in the whole city centre when the cost-benefit disclosure statement says that we have to prepare the analysis for every road within the city centre, is my understanding under 4.4 quite clearly, and that's just not a 5-minute piece of work, and then the outcomes of the feedback could make it a real hodgepodge if one road's 40, one road's 30, and we get quite a poor outcome actually. One around need. This point here has been made quite clearly. The travel speeds when it had no traffic on the road was shared in public comment today, and I would suggest many other residents' experience would be that you can travel through at a low speed because there's no need to put the foot down. The council was criticised of doing nothing for 12 years at committee, when actually we've done streetscape work that have narrowed the carriageway, we've widened the footpaths, we've put some more courtesy crossings in, and all street treatment around the city centre streetscape. That has been a huge investment, and we've got plans to do more of it in our long-term plan. So to say that we've done nothing, I think is completely blinded to the fact that we've spent millions actually improving some of these carriageways. And not to mention that there's more increased bus movements across the inner city, and that also naturally slows the traffic. And that is taking away the fact of cluttering the city with a whole bunch of speed signs around that. It just seems so unnecessary in the already busyness and noise of signage and marketing in the inner city. My feedback I've had as a barometer, I've had none requesting us to slow speeds in the inner city. None apart from a public comment today and some members at committee wanting to include it. And also, last point, I think it's a distraction from the work we have to do. We have to consult around the school speeds, and the work's been here outlined in 3.2 very clearly that the other two parcels that we're consulting on is to address the critical urgent safety needs in the case of Longburn-Rongotia Road. And in the other, it is to address the time-sensitive barrier to growth in the case of Wanaka Road, which is, I've had that in my ear. I've had both those two other issues in my ear a lot to address, and then to say that this other is of a lesser urgency and then try and make it the prominent fixture of this whole consultation, I just think it's actually a little bit irresponsible to deal with the urgent and the critical work that we need to do actually. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Denison. Councillor Haputa.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't be voting for this resolution. My reasons are, I think this will become an election issue, which I don't think it should be an election issue. And my other reason is I do think we should just be basically dealing with the speed management around schools and not dealing with it as it around the CBD. We haven't had the Chamber of Commerce or the BID come to us and say that this is an issue for the CBD. Nobody's come and told us about that from those spectrums, and they are our groups that should be coming to us. They should be telling us, and both of them haven't been to us and said this is an issue for our CBD. If they had, we would have done something about it, but both of them haven't. So my primary reason is that we haven't had any advocacy groups come to us to say anything about it, and the officer's report's quite clear, which we all voted for unanimously, basically said we should leave it alone. And I think they also outlined a really good consultation process that could start in December and go forward from there. And I think that's what we should be doing, is going forward from December after the election and not having an election process in the middle of it, because that would just really put things in the middle of it all. So I just think we should get on with doing the school process and not do this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson, online.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I mean, I will be supporting this, as I supported it at committee. But I did just want to make some points. You can't, in your statement, say that it's a low-speed environment and then make some prophecies of doom about all the things that will go wrong if we then put speed limits in. Either it's a low-speed environment and putting signs up will simply confirm that, or it's not a low-speed environment, in which case putting signs up will do something. So I'm not following the logic of Councillor Wood's arguments at all. I think there's a lot of hyperbole in these arguments, and some of the other councillors have also said things that I think are rather strange. If we think that this is an issue that we should address, I think we should address it, not shy away from it because it's an election year. I mean, I personally think that those councillors that are worried about being an election year, you know, have the confidence to stand by your decisions. You know, put yourself up for election on what you think is important. That's what everyone else is doing. So I don't think it matters whether it's an election year or not. If we think this is something that needs doing, we should be doing it. And this would not be by any means the first time in which we have gone against officers' advice. Voting for the report from officers is not to say we agree with everything they put in it. It's simply to say that we accept that they have presented a report. I can remember many instances where council has made decisions that have not been in keeping with officer advice because we have determined that whatever it is a higher priority for our community. And we've done it on multiple occasions, and pretty much everyone sitting around the table has agreed on doing things differently to what officers have said. So officers give their best advice, but we're the ones who are here to make the decisions. We're the ones to decide on priorities. And I just don't accept the argument that, oh, well, officers have said it's going to be very hard. Well, lots of things have been said to be very hard. I can remember when I first came onto council, I was told how hard it was going to be to put a roundabout in Monrad Street, but somehow we managed to do it after a notice of motion came up. So I just think, councillors, we need to remember we're here to make the decisions. Officers are here to give advice. We're here to take responsibility for the decisions we made. We're also here to do what we think is best for the community, whether it's election year or not. So I'd encourage you to support this. I think it's a very sensible move, except that it's a low-speed environment already, but it would be helpful, I think, to have that enshrined in regulation so that those few people who would attempt to speed through the CBD get to be slowed down, and that makes it a safer environment for everyone. I just don't think this is controversial at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I've got a couple of things to say, really, and just picking up on what Councillor Johnson has just said. This is really quite simply just about a speed designation. And the whole point here is that this has been sitting around for 12 plus years. We still haven't actually got to it. I totally agree with Councillor Barrett in saying that, you know, when we put things into stage 2, sometimes those things just never happen. So therefore, we need to actually give this a little bit of urgency. So this is really just about the preparatory work to actually then put this through for consultation, and that will include the bid, the Chamber of Commerce, and all other people who are interested in what this might do or not do for our community. And the last point I'll make is that businesses in CBDs actually do benefit from pedestrianisation. That is well researched, it is a fact. So it is something which may not necessarily be adverse to the business community, as has been intimated before. So this is just a process of designation or exploring designation for our community to make it a safer place. And I guess the other point I'll just make is that it is very, very hard for us to actually just click our fingers and actually get some information immediately just around how safe or unsafe our CBD is. That's because of the systems through NZTA and the CAS system, which there are significant delays in terms of how they enter and make data available for the community. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Michelab.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise to actually vote against this notice of motion, not because it's an election year, but because I think it's the right thing to do. One of the reasons, and the reasons why I'll be voting against this are as follows. Look, I'm all for providing a safe environment for pedestrians and people using active modes of transportation. But I think the issue for me, is that number one, I disagree with the rationale argued by the mover, especially around improving traffic flow and also city centre, improving city centre business, and also delivering cost efficiencies. There's no science behind it that actually can back those arguments or those points made by the mover in the notice of motion. Traffic is already slow in these areas. The reason why I'm also voting against this is simply because I believe that the average speed limits in those areas are already quite low, primarily due to traffic signals. I've counted about 17 to 20 traffic lights in the inner ring roads. We have narrow roads on those stretches or on those roads as well, in the designated areas that we're trying to reduce speed. Plenty of roundabouts as well, and raised pedestrian platforms. We have enough calming traffic measures to make sure that the city is safe to drive around. Now, should there, like Councillor Wood mentioned earlier about that one incident at the roundabout, and we don't have all the data as well, that we need to probably make sure that we make informed decisions as well around crashes and that sort of things. But the thing is that sometimes driver responsibility is to blame, or driver behavior, is to blame for some of the, or behavior is to change. We might have someone who might not respect the speed limit, for example. And that happens sometimes in the morning when you're passing across the city centre. But the thing is that when the city is moving, right now, as I look outside, or as I just came walking into work this morning, we have enough traffic calming measures to make sure that traffic is slow. We look at the square just outside Pepperplatz, for example. All the traffic measures that we've put in place there is designed to slow down traffic. So how slow do we want to go to ensure that we are safe? There's nothing that suggests to me outside this building that it's dangerous to drive around the city. So for those reasons, I'll be voting against this. Number one is because we have, it's the traffic, in those areas are already quite slow, and we have enough pedestrian or traffic calming measures to make sure that the city remains or is and remains safe. So for those reasons, I'll be voting against the notice of motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues, for the debate. It was interesting when I watched online in the committee, and it's been interesting again. I note the nervousness about this becoming an election issue. I seem to remember it was an election issue in 2012 alongside the bus station, and look how far we've come. Also, I'd like to say that business advocacy about what happens in our central city isn't the only advocacy about what happens in our central city. The views of the public who use that space recreationally and for their shopping and retail purposes, the views of the people who cycle through it en route to other parts of the city, the views of the people who live in the central city, which is something we're seeking to encourage. All of that advocacy is as important as the business advocacy that I would hope we would seek through the consultation period. The debate here today seems to be that we accept, most of us, that the central city is a low-speed environment. And for some of us, we think, well, our job is done. We have achieved a low-speed environment, whereas others feel like there is more work to be done. And I think that, for me, has been the heart of this question. Does it matter if the posted speed limit is faster than the actual speed limit that people can drive at? Does that matter? And the research says yes. Yes, it does. It matters for driver behaviour. If the speed limit's set higher than what's realistically safe, then drivers feel they can do that, and that leads to increased risks of accidents. If the speed limit is set too high, but most drivers are going slower because of the urban design things that we've put in place, it creates a disconnect that confuses drivers, actually leads to antisocial behaviour, those road rage type of incidents that we've seen, which disproportionately affect cyclists and pedestrians. It affects traffic flow, and there was some suggestion that people were just making up science on this one. Not true at all. Higher speed limits in areas where traffic generally moves slower leads to abrupt lane changes, frustration amongst drivers, contributes to accidents. No question about that. Speed limits that align with actual driving behaviour maintain smoother traffic flow, reducing stop-go conditions, contributes to efficient movement around the city. There's a public perception of safety that's important here. The speed limit's perceived as unrealistic, saying you can do 50 around the square when everybody knows you can't. It contributes to a culture of disregard for speed limits overall, again, leading to increase in violations and accidents. Appropriately set speed limits foster a perception that the road environment is safe for all users. You're saying, you know you can only do 30, 40. That's what the speed limit says. We've made this a safe space. So speed limits that are aligned with actual driving speeds enhance compliance and make enforcement more effective. But when drivers view speed limits as reasonable, they are more likely to adhere to them. So we're building a sense of our community expectation around what happens in that space. Now, I have some sympathy for the view around the peripheral streets of the CBD, and my questions to officers were trying to help me in my understanding. My understanding of this is that we don't have to treat the CBD or the inner ring road as one block. There is room for a nuanced conversation that we can have with our community, and room for some roads to be not included, as well as some included. We could take a more narrow view of what we're meaning, and I think that actually would be a good thing. I agree with some of the comments made around the peripheral streets, because what I'm trying to achieve is a speed limit that's posted that aligns with the actual speed that people naturally travel at, because of the work that we've done since 2012. We've done a lot of work. We've reduced the speed in the central city. It is a lower speed environment. I think it's time that we put the signs up that said we have achieved that.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, ma'am. This doesn't need addressing because it isn't an issue. I think this is a terribly poor use of ratepayers' valuable money, and I guess it's probably in the never never because it's not needed. I drove to council this morning and I live extremely close, and it took me 3 minutes. I drove to the conditions, and I don't see speeds need reducing. I don't think it's an issue for safety. Not once in 3 years has somebody rung me complaining about speeds in the CBD. They've certainly rung me about a hell of a lot of other issues in our city. So I won't be supporting this, and that's all I have to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, colleagues. I just wanted to comment firstly on Councillor Wood's assertions that he was addressing, particularly one of the comments he made that the CBD is probably the most pedestrian-friendly area in the city, which in itself is an assertion, and also just particularly about the visibility, design and layout being more likely to be the cause of an accident. Now, I would suggest that if you're having issues in an area with poor visibility, design and layout, what you do to navigate that situation is you slow down. That's your natural behaviour. And also, to my other colleague, in saying that you are all for providing this for the safety of pedestrians, but the but there indicates that you're not all for safety. You're for safety with a caveat on it, unless, or but, something else. Anyway, I think that sometimes in council we say things without actually any intention of actually doing the things, and this seems to be one of them. The survivability data is very strong and irrefutable, so we say that we'll do it, and then we delay it indefinitely until the appetite changes and we get really strong, passionate speeches about how it's not urgent and it's not even needed, despite the data. To say that City Council slows us down, we cannot be going any slower than this. This has been going, my daughter's nearly 12. This has been going on for the whole of her lifetime. I think that this is overcomplicated because what we're being presented is a matter of figuring out which street fits into which of only 2 applicable categories in Schedule 3. I think consultation fatigue and efficiency is something we've talked about a lot, and when it suits us, we're like, yep, let's not overwhelm the public, and then when it doesn't suit us, we go, yeah, no, we're very happy to do 2 consultations on the same topic, and that won't overwhelm people or frustrate them or cast aspersions on how effectively or efficiently we're dealing with speeds in the city. And I think that also there's been quite a lot of commentary about no one's ringing me up or no one's beating down the door. And I think that really disregards the fact that, yeah, there may not be a chamber of pedestrians to advocate, but there are groups. There's Streets Ahead, the chair of which came and talked to us this morning, but there are numerous advocacy groups which come and submit every year. They email us. I'm on a bunch of mailing lists just by virtue of being elected, and I receive constant talk and advocacy from really well organised groups. So although we may not be getting phone calls, I think we are receiving advocacy. We do have these groups talking to us. And I think if you're a person with mobility challenges, if you use a walker or you're having an injury, you have small children and you're navigating these spaces, you might have a different view than what today has been quite a very car-centric argument about what it's like to navigate that environment. I think if traffic is already slow, then there's no harm in putting up signs which reflect that reality, or at the very least, including it in a consultation that we already plan to do and get feedback on it. It just seems sensible.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Putting signs up would help traffic flow. Well, I dispute that. It's one part of Palmerston North where regularly I get passed by cyclists speeding past my car. I get see scooters whizzing in and out and beating the cars all around the square. Maybe they should be slowed down. You have a look at our square. You see so many jaywalkers because they feel so safe walking in this slow environment. In fact, there's one part of the square where we've got a separation bit, and we've put a bit of a walkway there so they can jaywalk with safety and not trip over the grass and they get their shoes dirty. For goodness sake. I can remember in Palmerston North a few years ago when we had a major boy racer problem in the square. And the boy racers used to zoom around the square and have races. But our engineers have addressed that. And all you get is occasionally the old idiot sitting in his car revving the motor up because they can't go any speed in the square. What benefit would there be to put up traffic signs and designate this a 30k area? Well, the benefits are very simple. It would cost us money to do nothing. It wouldn't change a thing. We would spend money on signs, staff time to do all the preparation, and our ratepayers love seeing us spend money so their rates go up. What a ridiculous thing to do. We've got one of the safest CBDs in New Zealand. You can't speed even if you want to. Why would we want to spend money telling people, oh, you can't speed here? Because they know it already. For goodness sake, let's have some common sense.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. About an hour ago, we confirmed the minutes of our last council meeting. At the bottom of page 22, it's very well outlined that we agreed at our last council meeting what the scope of the stage 1 will be in terms of the work that we're progressing, and we all agreed with that. I'm really disappointed and surprised that we are already relitigating that decision only an hour later. I do not believe that this is important enough for the level of urgency that is somehow being expressed to progress this later this year versus what the officers are saying will be early next year. I think the arguments around the table, we're having the wrong argument. All the arguments around the table seem to be on the merits of whether we put the speed limits down. What we're talking about here is when we have the conversation with our community. No, I don't think it's worth, I think the concerns outlined in the officer's report are actually really valid. We would put other important work at risk by pushing this ahead. Important work that has deadlines. Rushed decisions are not always good decisions. I think this issue needs to be well considered. Officers have outlined why it's a little bit more complex than it was a few years ago. The limitations of the new rule does mean that there are added complexity to this that I think we need to have a further conversation about before trying to rush this to be putting it in with what Councillor Wood has said, putting controversial discussion in with non-controversial, straightforward discussion, which we talked about at committee, should be a light touch, just addressing those schools that perhaps haven't been talked to. Because as you recall, we already had, a lot of this work has already been done, but we had to repeat it, which was unfortunate. So I'm really disappointed that we've had an hour of conversation at this meeting where we've got many, many important issues to discuss, trying to relitigate the timing of when we go to our community. So definitely I will not be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor. I suppose I'd like to add my 2 cents in here. I'd just like to say that we know Palmerston North's a safe city. Well, we certainly try and make it safe. And sometimes we have to deal with issues that present themselves, and I think I picked up on the idea or the notion that Councillor Barrett had said. He said, let's, for want of a better term, front foot this. There's an issue. We know there's evidence to say that if you go over a certain speed, even at 50 kilometres or 40 kilometres, that will cause immeasurable harm. Not long ago, I was speaking to someone, it was a few months ago, and he told me that his sister had passed, and I'd said, oh, if you don't mind, could you tell me how she passed? And he said, she was crossing the road outside Palmerston North Boys High School. And the person was coming along on a motorcycle within 50 kilometres and she was killed. She was 18 years old. And that sort of took me back and I thought, oh my goodness, it's true that we appear to be a city that's hell-bent on motorists, supporting the motorists, but more and more we are getting pedestrians and cyclists. And somehow I think some people don't even want to think about that. They're sort of saying, oh, you know, there's very few of them, but things are changing. And we are a regional city, but we already have evidence that we're growing. And there should be a consequence. You know, you put a sign up, maybe people don't adhere to it, but at least we know if that sign is up there, then there will be a consequence should they be non-compliant. And the non-compliance is sort of in the face of safety and well-being. And I think that we should front foot things. I think that we should consider what is beneficial for our city. If we move this down the track, we know it's not going to be addressed for a few years later, because look how long it's taken, 2013. And I do appreciate what the officers had said when they'd come back. It is complex. However, are we proactive, or are we too scared to make the call and say, hey, it's not going to harm me. This is the heart of the city. The manawa, te marae o hene, and everything that goes around it, we want it particularly safe. So, yeah, I'm going to support this, clearly. But thank you. I think the debate has been really good, and that's what we should have here. So, without any further delay, could we please vote? Oh, sorry, you've got a right of reply. Sorry, didn't mean to take that away from you, Councillor Barrett. Kia ora.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, colleagues, for, yes, taking the time for the first debate at Council around this, noting that the minutes were reflecting a committee decision that had only some members present. Really helpful to see that the debate is actually around quite a lot more than timing. It's around some quite fundamental differences in vision for the city centre and how we achieve a revitalised, people-oriented heart for our city and how we improve road safety. Clearly some different views, that's fine. Just want to pick up on a couple points made. One around the traffic flow data, and thank you, Councillor Bowen, for your commentary. And yours as well, Councillor Findlay, in terms of why you're stuck waiting in a car while a bike whizzes by. The main reason is that 30% of the people that are in a car in the city centre are on their way through rather than to. They're clogging it up, so you have to wait. Those people, far better off on the ring road, actually getting where they're going, so that those that are in the heart of the city can also get where they want to go. It's a really simple traffic flow story. We've invested big time in a ring road to get people onto it. This is a simple prompt for them to do just that. The other one is around cost efficiencies, and really appreciated the number of people that chose to comment on that, and somehow equating the cost of, what was it, 30 grand to do some consultation work with millions and millions that it takes to actually reshape a streetscape, right? So yes, we can continue to do, you know, traffic calming and traffic calming and traffic calming and all those things. That costs hugely compared to simply putting a sign up that gives a prompt that most road users will actually pay attention to. So, you know, it's been amazing to hear from some people that are very concerned around costs, around the Streets for People work that we've done, around some of the city centre road improvements that are quailing now at the idea that we would just spend a few $1,000s to actually just set an overall tone around speed, knowing that if we don't do that, what we end up doing is continuing having to put in very high budget interventions to turn it into some kind of three-dimensional space that motorists bounce through and rattle their springs out. I mean, honestly, why don't we just do the simple one, guys? And finally, I wanted to touch on safety, and this is probably the one that I find most troubling of everything. The most troubling line of argument is around, you know, no one's been hurt in a city center crash, at least recently. No one's died yet. Well, as we've just heard, examples where when we don't get the interventions right, tragedies can happen. Waiting for harm before doing road safety properly is the wrong way to go. So please, let's move forward with this one joined-up conversation with the community, bringing together the school speeds conversation, the city center speeds conversation, so that we can deliver on all the benefits that they will achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. And with that, could I please ask that we vote that the council confirm the scope of the draft Speed Management Plan 2025 Stage 1 will include the city centre. Thank you. That has been lost, 8 votes against and 7 for. Thank you. Could I ask that we now move to item number 10, which is 21 Havelock Avenue, Bill Brown Park, proposal to grant a lease on council land to Kia Toa Football Club Incorporated, and the deliberations report. I'd invite Glenn Bunny, the manager property, and Perrine Green, property officer, thank you, to the table.
Morning, councillors, Madam Chair. I'd like to take this report as read, just noting that we are asking to grant a lease today. This is the final step in our lease process. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Don't appear to be any. Thank you very much, officers. Any comment? Oh, sorry, move? Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Haputa. Thank you. The recommendation that the council grant a community lease to Kia Toa Football Club Incorporated at 21 Havelock Ave, part of Bill Brown Park, Palmerston North, in accordance with the Support and Funding Policy 2022 and Section 54 of the Reserves Act 1977. And also that the council note that the land affected by the proposed community lease to Kia Toa Football Club Incorporated is Lot 1, DP 497, and Lot 442, DP 44,223. Thank you. And can I ask that we go to the vote for that? Thank you. That has been passed. Someone didn't vote? Someone's 2 people. Oh, yes. Kapai. So that has passed 13-0. Thank you very much. Now, everyone, we are going to move to the exclusion of the public because there are some items in the confidential agenda that we need to address. If we haven't finished before lunch break, then we'll adjourn and meet after. On advice, I've been asked to that we adjourn until after culture and sport meeting. Okay, Tapai? Thank you. So now we'll ask that members of the public please depart, and we will have a few minutes setting up. And I'll have a mover. Thank you very much, Councillor Dennison and also Councillor Naylor. Can we please vote on that? And then we'll go to morning tea after this. Could I ask if you all vote, please, for the exclusion of the public? Thank you. That has been passed 14-0. Thank you very much. We'll just have about a minute or two to set up. We're going to go to morning tea. I think you've all deserved it. And back